Hi guys, in today's how-to video I want to explain how you can be a nice IPSC or USPSA competitor by explaining the basic principles of match etiquette. This video is primarily focused on beginner shooters who have to participate in their first IPSC or USPSA match, regardless of being a club match or a higher level match that you'll do nationally or internationally. My objective is to really discuss at length the spoken, but more importantly the unspoken principles of good practice to be considered a nice competitor and also build up a good reputation for yourself. I've divided the video up into three sections. The first is before the match, the second section is during the match, and the last section actually discusses a couple of principles for after the match. So let's kick it off by the first section before the match. One of the first advices that I really would give is, especially if you are a beginner shooter, is to double check whether or not any and all of your equipment and gear is compliant with the IPSC and or the USPSA rules applicable to your respective division, to include your gun, your mags, your belt, and so forth, to make sure that everything is set up correctly and that during an equipment check that you don't get any remarks and then hastily have to make adjustments to your gear, or worse, because of things not being correct at your gun, you are bumped up to, for example, open division, which is a competitive disadvantage. So these are all things that you can check beforehand. Also important, if you have not done it yet, even if you shoot production ammo, is to double check your power factor for your respective division, either in minor or major. And this is specifically applicable to people that reload their ammo, because you will not be the first competitor who has reloaded ammo, maybe has changed some components of the reloaded ammo, and then being called up for a chronograph test and finding out that you did not achieve your minimum power factor, for example, either being not scored for the match or being downgraded from major to minor, for example, which has also an impact on your scoring, but also your self-image and your reputation. So these are all things that you can double check before the match to avoid any embarrassing situations during the match itself. Also, some advice that is important: if in any way, shape or form possible, try to squad with your club competitors or other club competitors that you know and trust, because it's a semi-trusted environment. I mean, the club you're going to is not really known, but your squad is known, and that can help also boost up your self-confidence and also your trust, especially if you have any questions or concerns. The other competitors will certainly help you. Not saying that if you are squadded with competitors that you are not familiar with, I would say 99.99% of the competitors, if you ask them a question, they will certainly make some time to explain a couple of things to you. Be aware that from time to time you really have the rare exception of a competitor who will not be willing to engage with you or answer any of your questions, but again, that's the rare exception. Another thing I recommend is to register correctly as per the rules stipulated in the match invitation, and also important is to pay correctly, fully and timely, because the match organizers, most of them are 100% volunteers, and especially for larger matches it really takes a lot of time to double check all the registrations and then cross check whether or not the competitors who have registered actually paid correctly, fully and timely, and you can save them a lot of time by doing all of this correctly and timely, so that again you are being considered as a nice competitor and they don't have to chase you down. Another thing related to the match organizers, especially for the larger matches, if they took the time to invest in a match book and to draw up the written stage briefings and to publicize them, also take the time to read through them, to analyze them. I'm not gonna go too deep into that because I have another video that goes into details on specifically analyzing written stage briefings, so check that out on my YouTube channel. Another thing I strongly advise is that before the match, for example, for known or unknown reasons, you will not be able, you know that you won't be able to participate. As soon as you know, let the match organizers know, let your club captain know, so that they can check out whether or not people are put on the reserve list, and they can reach out to them and tell them a spot has opened up, and so that they can still participate. But even if it's last minute due to a personal situation, or maybe worse, an accident on the way to the match, regardless, or a medical emergency, please advise the club captain, a fellow squad member, and also the match organization that you won't be able to make it. Again, maybe they have time to call somebody from the reserve list, or another thing, and that makes running the match again a lot simpler, especially for the RO on the specific bay or area or stage, so that they don't have to call up your name and then every time the other squad members have to explain that you are not participating in a match. So match administration is a lot easier if from the master list you are actually removed, so that the ROs on the particular stages do not see you as a valid competitor for that specific match or stage. So it makes life a lot easier, especially for the match organization, and it doesn't cost you anything except for one phone call. So what are the main match etiquettes for during the match on match day itself? Well, everything starts up as soon as you get up in the morning. It's really important to adopt a positive and a friendly mindset, because you are gonna have a lot of fun on that day. I refer you to another video made on mental aspects that you can find on my YouTube channel that goes in much deeper into that topic and the mental aspect topic. Another important point is be on time, depending on where the match is organized and how you need to get there. When I say be on time, I really mean for the match itself. In general, I would say try to be there at least at a minimum 1 hour in advance before the actual match is being shot. That gives you enough time to settle in, to register, to put on your gear, to have a drink, to have some discussions with other shooters on site and so forth. And the most important thing is it will give you peace of mind and will avoid an additional unnecessary stress factor if you, for example, late and you have to do all these things just before you're about to shoot your first stage, for example. Also important is referring again to the match book or the invitation, is be aware and also respect the local rules for the specific club that organizes the match, because the rules may not be 100% the same as in your own club. Maybe different policies as far as the safety area is concerned. Maybe you're not allowed to take any video on the range whilst you are shooting, and so forth and so forth. So be aware, and if you're not certain, just ask somebody of the match organization, and I'm pretty sure that they will be glad to help and assist you in any way, shape or form possible. Also, depending on whether or not it's required, register on site so that the match organizers know that you're actually on site about to participate in the match. Especially for the larger matches, oftentimes you have to do and report for equipment check and power factor check using a chronograph before the actual start of the match. So if it's required, be aware of that. Also calculate that into the time that you are there in advance, because especially if there's a lot of shooters and you have to queue up and then you have to shoot your first stage, make sure that you are really at ease, that you have enough time, and also that you don't have to queue, so that everything runs smoothly, not only for yourself but also for the match organizers. Especially for those competitors who shoot IPSC and not USPSA, because that's one of the important differences between IPSC and USPSA. In IPSC, you are not allowed under no circumstance to actually go on to the stages you're about to shoot, to do walkthroughs before the actual match and stage is being shot, and before the RO actually gives you the briefing. You're not allowed in any way, shape or form possible to visit and walk the stages beforehand. You can only do that before, or actually after the RO briefing. So even if you're ahead of time and even if there's nobody around, don't be tempted to actually go onto the stages to see where the targets are located, distances, and do a semi or full walkthrough, because you will get in trouble if you would do that. If you're again ahead of time, offers you a lot of flexibility and possibilities. Meet and greet your fellow competitors, especially those of your squad, and especially if you don't know them. If you arrive on time, that gives you the possibility to say hello, to get to know each other, check out the gear, for example, and maybe also start to get some advice, especially if there are intermediate and or advanced competitors and shooters. Another thing that is important is before you actually start to shoot your stage, when you get to the stage, is make a habit of meeting and greeting the RO and any other match organization staff that is present. For example, those who reset and or patch, the scorekeeper, and so forth and so forth. Just say hi, introduce yourself to them, just be friendly, so that again also they get to know you and that you are being considered a nice competitor. If you haven't done so, the written stage briefings in, I would say, most of the matches that also I participated in, even the club matches, they actually mount up the written stage briefing. So check it out so that you know that you're actually on the right stage, and that you again refresh your memory, because you've already checked out the written stage briefing beforehand, is again a refresher on a whole bunch of things that can help you in your strategy and your stage plan. Also important is always be respectful when the RO is giving the briefing before you can actually do your walkthrough. Here, do not interrupt the RO. Don't be tempted to give a whole bunch of comments, for example, and remarks. Listen actively, be respectful, and wait until the RO has finished giving his briefing or her briefing to ask any questions you might have. Again, because you know the rules, don't ask any questions dealing with standard basic rules, but if there are things that are not clear to you, ask the RO. By preference, actually ask the RO instead of a competitor, because if a competitor misunderstood something, he or she might give you incorrect advice. If you want to be certain about something, always ask the RO when in doubt. Also important, normally when the briefing has ended, the RO will call out the shooting order, and the shooting order is also important, especially for the first shooter online. Might be you, might be somebody else, but in general it's good practice to let the first shooter actually start the walkthrough, and or be in front when there are activators that have to be shown, identified, and movers and swingers, so they have a clear view on what's going on. So if you're the first shooter, most of the competitors will actually let you in front, And if other shooters are ahead of you, make sure that you invite them to step in front of you to actually do the walkthrough. And also, when you are doing your walkthrough, and maybe you are 100% confident, familiar, you want to focus on one particular point in the stage, don't cut lines and don't step in front of other competitors unless you are invited to do so, for example, because you're the first shooter. But don't start cutting lines when you have to do your walkthrough. As soon as the RO has given his or her briefing and the walkthrough has ended and the first shooter will actually be online, as of that point I would also strongly recommend not to be too chatty with the RO, the staff, the patchers, but also with the other competitors. You'll notice especially the serious, motivated and passionate competitors are what I call in the zone and are focusing on the stage, are visualizing, are air gunning, and they don't like to be interrupted. It's not that they are unfriendly and they do not want to help you, but they're trying to get into a specific state of mind. They're trying to visualize, to optimize their performance for the stage that they're about to shoot. So again, you can talk to them before, you can talk to them afterwards, but before they're shot, I really recommend that you do not bother them unless they non-verbally or verbally engage with you. Then it's not a problem if they're willing to do so, but also be respectful for those competitors who are in the zone, are trying to optimize their process and visualize. So just be aware of that. If you are talking to people, try to avoid any and all negatives, any negative topics, content, experiences, and so forth, because negativity attracts negativity. There's no benefit whatsoever for that. So avoid any and all negative aspects, especially as it relates to shooting. Now, what happens and what is the practice as far as when you're asked something or you notice, especially for beginner shooters, you notice something during the walkthrough? The first thing I would recommend as a general practice is ask the competitor if they're open for advice, and if they state yes, then you can share some tips and tricks with the competitor. On the other hand, if you have a question and you want to engage with somebody that is also doing his or her walkthrough, first ask if you can ask them a question, because again, they're in the process, they're trying to understand the stage, to weigh risk reward, to build up the stage plan, and they're not there to provide all ins and outs and so forth and so forth. So if you want to provide some tips and tricks, first ask. And if you actually are asking for advice, tips or tricks, first ask the competitor if that's okay with him or her before you start interrupting them. Again, I would say 99.99% of the cases, the competitor will be correct and respectful as far as asking them and then sharing, and vice versa. But ask first and then share tips, or ask first and then receive tips. And also be respectful for those competitors who are in the zone and who do not want to spend the limited time to actually give you tips and tricks and so forth and so forth. It's again not that they are unfriendly, it's because they are focused on the process and trying to understand the stage to build up their stage plan. So respect that. Another thing, especially for the RO and the stage staff on site, be aware and also be ready when you are called online, because it has a negative impact on the flow, and it again takes a lot of time. If shooters are not aware when they're about to shoot, they're not ready yet, it costs time, and then it will run the squad late and have an impact. So be mindful and be aware when you're in the hole, when you are on deck, and when you are online. I also have another video that you can find on my YouTube channel discussing the different moments then before you actually get online and online, on the tips and tricks what you can and can't do to build up a process. When you are online and they're, for example, still patching, that's also your moment, your final moment to do a walkthrough of the full stage or specific difficult points of attention during the stage. Depends on, be it a short, a medium or long course, the size of the stage, the bay, and so forth and so forth. But that's your final moment to do a walkthrough. If in doubt, you can always ask the RO, and I would say most of them will also let you do a final walkthrough, one final walkthrough, not 5 final walkthroughs. So take the time to impress again the stage plan onto your subconscious mind so you can actually execute it. Something that I regularly see during matches is that, for example, not the competitor online, but the one on deck, or even worse, the one in the hole, is already actually cutting the line, if you will, to do a walkthrough of the stage before it's his or her moment to shoot. Again, this can put you into trouble and can be considered unsportsmanship behavior. So this is something that you need to avoid. When you are the next online, that's your moment to do a final walkthrough, and not when you're on deck or in the hole. You have to wait for your moment to actually engage in your final walkthrough, so don't skip lines on that. Another thing that especially makes ROs really crazy if you take 3 minutes to make ready. Here too, again, every second counts, not only for you on the stage, but also for the match organizers, because whether or not you are aware or not, the match organizers have tried to figure out how much time a shooter will take for a specific stage and then for the squad, to make sure that there's a good flow and that the match doesn't run out too late, for example. And that is being interrupted if you have competitors that have a 3-minute make ready process, for example. So try to avoid that. You can take a moment to make ready, to get a final good grip on your gun, to check whether or not your red dot is on, but don't exaggerate and don't make it too long, because again you will attract some comments on that, either by the RO or by other fellow squad members. Always listen to the RO commands, and when in doubt, ask. So don't load and make ready unless the command is actually given. If the command is given but it was not clear to you, for example, look at the RO and ask him or her. But if the commands are not given, don't load and make ready, because again that will get you into trouble and or maybe even a DQ for the match. So avoid that and listen, and if when in doubt, ask the RO. Now imagine that you've just shot a stage and the RO called out a finger on the trigger, for example, and actually gave you a warning. In theory, they can stop you and DQ you for the finger on the trigger. Oftentimes you'll see they give you 1 warning, but they will not give you 5 warnings. But maybe you passed the 90-degree rule and you broke the 180, for example. Always a stressful situation. Again, listen to the RO commands and don't do anything before your gun is unloaded and shown cleared and holstered. But in general, stay calm, stay composed, and remain factual. Factual means know and stick to the rules and not interpretations thereof. And also, please be honest. I mean, if you have a target at 20 meters and the RO or the scorekeeper actually calls out an alpha mic, for example, don't start discussing and claiming that it's a hole-in-one and that you need to do overlay and so forth and so forth. Just be honest and realistic, as far as score keeping and taking is concerned. But the most important thing is stay calm, stay composed, and stay factual. If you do that, the RO will listen, they will weigh, but it's the final decision. If you do not agree with the RO, there's also a procedure to also call in the range master, for example, and so forth and so forth. I'll dedicate another video on that. But if you disagree with the RO, stay calm, stay composed, and stay factual, and also be honest, not only with yourself but also with the RO. Now, what happens if you are DQ'd? For that, I also refer to two videos I actually made on the topic of disqualification or DQ that you can find on my YouTube channel, so I refer to that for more information. Now, what happens especially during club matches, but also some level 2 matches, for example, if the match organizers did not have the possibility to find enough staff to patch and reset, for example. If no patches are available and you are not online or on deck, I strongly urge you to proactively provide your help and assistance to patch and reset the stage. But here too, be aware of the rules. For example, that there's a minimum distance that you need to keep and that you cannot start patching targets or resetting targets before the RO actually has called the results on that particular target. And if you're not sure, don't first reset or patch and then ask, but ask first. And when the RO gives you the go-ahead, you can actually start resetting and or patching the target. But also the 1 meter rule is important, and don't touch, even if you're 1 meter away, don't touch the targets before the RO actually had the opportunity to score that particular target. Another tip I can give also to avoid any discussions after the match is as soon as you shot the stage and the scores are noted either on paper and or on practice score, take the time and do it in a conscious way, verify the time and also verify the results at that particular moment, and don't make it some kind of an administrative mandatory procedure that carries no weight. On the contrary, this is your first and not your only, but your first but most important opportunity to make sure that the time is noted correctly. Again, times are being noted by people, and people might have understood something incorrectly. For example, 14.70 and the score taker noted 17.40, for example. That's your opportunity to identify it and also bring it to the attention of the RO so that they can recheck the timer and adjust the time in the correct moment, and or the same thing with the results. For example, you're sure that you did not have a delta. This is the moment that you need to bring it to the attention of the RO so they can verify and discuss and make the decision on whether or not to correct the time and or the score for that particular stage. You have a second opportunity within 1 hour after the match, but that's also something for another video on time. So don't just brush it off, but spend the time. It takes like a couple of seconds to verify the actually noted time and the results to avoid any issues afterwards. When the squad actually finished the area bay or stage, and you will not see the RO, the staff afterwards, that's again, it's again considered nice and correct to thank the RO and the staff, greet them before you actually leave to the next area bay or stage where there will be another RO. What are the match etiquette principles for after the match? one of the first things to do is, as soon as you've completed, and especially the squad completed the match, is to check your verifications and report any and all inconsistencies that you have noted, and take them up with the match organizers as soon as possible. There's a whole bunch of rules related to that. You have a small window of opportunity to do so. So that's your moment to actually check and report the inconsistencies. Also, if you have any questions, concerns, remarks, if you think you have some areas for improvement, the match organizers are there. Take it up directly with them. In most clubs, most organizers are open to listen and to discuss and provide more context, but don't start discussing it with people who really cannot do anything about it. Take it up with people of the match organization. Also, don't be a stranger. So as soon as you've verified everything is in order, there are no areas of concern, for example, don't leave the match venue immediately. Stick around with the squad, stick around to meet and greet and talk to other competitors that are still there, building out your network. That's also an interesting opportunity to check and verify, for example, equipment that you've seen, discuss and do after action reports on the stages, gain experience, and so forth and so forth. So don't be a stranger and just leave, but engage with other competitors that are there, or another squad that is on the way. Also, if you remain on site for a little while, it's always good to support the local club by buying and also consuming some food and drinks locally. That helps the club grow, increase and improve their finances, and also help them organize and set up better matches in the future. Also, and this is difficult and tough in the current times, but be and remain respectful on any and all social media platforms. Again, mind you that the match organizers, all the staff are all volunteers. They've invested a lot of time that is not paid to organize a match so that you can have fun. Don't tear them down, don't break them down. Again, if you have something to say, talk to them whilst you are still there, but don't start bloating out things on social media, because again, that's not respectful towards the people who've invested their free time in organizing the match. Another thing, especially if you've taken video footage, first person or third person footage of you shooting the match, don't publish anything until after the match. So when the match is still ongoing, and some matches actually take a couple of days, don't start to publish videos as soon as you finish. For example, you shoot the pre-match on the first day, on a 3-day match, for example, because that might again give strategic advantages to shooters that still have to shoot the match. So you have to level the playing field. You can edit your videos, it's not a problem, but don't publicize them on any social media platform, out of respect for the match organizers, the people who are shot, and also the people who are about to shoot the match. And then also important, analyze and learn from everything that you've experienced to better prepare you for the next match. And remember, practical shooting in IPSC and USPSA is a lot of fun.